Welcome to DD Durban Online. We're a church family on mission to see Durban change into a place where Jesus reigns. Here's this week's message.
Great. So, as I've mentioned, we're diving into week number 2 of our family series called Hope this morning. And for those of you guys who missed last week, I have some good news. You can actually go to YouTube. We have our recordings up there. Just search DD Durban and you'll find out everything that happened last week. But I will recap a little bit as well this week regarding what we talked about. I'd love to start this morning off with asking you a question. Who did you want to become one day when you grow up? Anybody had that experience when you were young? And everybody asked you, who do you want to be one day? Who are you becoming one day when you're growing up? Quickly share with the person next to you, what was that picture that you had in mind of yourself? Cool. I see some smiles around the room as we're discussing that topic. Can I take a guess that nobody here wanted to become someone who is insignificant, unvaluable, no meaning in life? Am I correct when I'm saying that? My guess is that all of us dreamed about becoming a truly significant person. And whatever picture you have around that, that's our greatest hope. We hope to become someone of meaning. And hence the topic of hope being on the table. Because as we've seen last week, hope is kind of like the little word that weaves or is bringing our lives together. We start by hoping for a good school, and we end up by hoping for a house, and then hoping for children in the house, and then we hope to get the children out of the house. But basically, our lives are strung together with hope. And last week, we looked at the problem with hope in this world. And we said basically 2 different categories. The one is that there are things that we hope for in this world, and then there are things that we place our hope in. To see the things that we hope for come to reality. And mostly the things that we hope for, we actually looked at a little synonym word that we can use for all of us. It would be, we're all hoping for a little bit of heaven, especially when it's going rough in your life. You know, when you're a teacher and it's the end of Feb and you're done and you're like, can I just have a break? I've been spending some time with teachers this past season, and it seems like they're all hoping for a spa day. That would be a little bit of heaven on earth. And the same thing for all of the challenges that we're facing. We're all longing for a piece of hope in our lives when it comes to this. So we're longing for a bit of heaven. The question, however, and the challenge that we face is, what do we place our hope in to see heaven coming down? And this is where we find the trouble within our day and age and within our culture, where hope has almost become a little bit synonymous to wishful thinking. Because it's kind of like, I'm really hoping for a great South Africa. And in 1994, I was hoping for an amazing South Africa. And it still feels like sometimes, and in some ways with corruption, I'm still hoping for a great South Africa. And sometimes you're like, can we face and look to what are we looking to get that to us? And sometimes we get to the point, I'm just using that as an example, to illustrate something that's a reality in all of our lives, that the powers that we hope in to produce the things that we hope for just fall short. And it becomes wishful thinking. So, like I mentioned last time, will Marvel ever make a good superhero movie again? Well, we hope so. Kind of feels like wishful thinking. And then we looked at how Jesus steps into this world where hope is kind of like a wishful thinking because we lack the power to bring heaven into our lives, true, real heaven. And then Jesus producing that. And he's saying, listen guys, I bring a kind of hope that can actually do it. And we looked at Ephesians 1, and I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to try my best to just quickly scan through that you can see how Jesus and the hope that he offers is radically different. So firstly, Paul says, and he prays for the church in Ephesus. And in verse 18, he says, he prays that you would know what is the hope that you have been called to. So Paul wants us to know the hope that we have in Jesus. That's the first thing. He believes if we have that, it changes the way we live. That's basically where we're going. And then he starts explaining the hope of Jesus. The first thing that he says about it is that it gives us a promised inheritance. And we talked about that and we said that is heaven. So Jesus promises us heaven. That's the hope. So if you're longing for heaven, Jesus says, I can give it to you. That's basically what Paul is saying. He's saying, I can give you heaven. And that's not heaven one day because it's an inheritance. So inheritance you get, again, for free, mahala, you don't earn it. Secondly, you get it when somebody dies. And whose inheritance are we getting? Jesus' inheritance that he already died? Yes. So when do we get the inheritance? Now, not one day. In fact, anybody in the room that would like it if I told you I can give you 50 million rand right now? I mean it. Yes, please. Some of the guys, when I mentioned this topic at a previous session, they're like, yes, definitely, please. And I'm already having plans for what I'm going to do with my 50 million. Now imagine I told you I can give you 50 million right now in your bank account. Just one little catch. You can only use it one day when you die. Then you can use your 50 million. I can almost see the faces. Oh, whatever. Oh, what's stupid. You're like, that's worthless. You know what's crazy? Sometimes people think this about Christianity. They think the hope that we have is only one day when we die. You can go to. Do you guys see? Unfortunately, the only problem with that is the Bible. Because Jesus is a totally different picture. He says we even need to pray. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Is that a picture of us going to heaven? Or is that a picture of heaven coming down to us? Do you guys see? Okay, so Jesus says he can bring heaven, but not one day. He can give you 50 million, not one day. He can give it now. That's one of the claims that he makes. He says it's there. But then on top of it, he also says he has the power to bring heaven down. And that we saw in verse 19. He says his power is immeasurable. So he's not like the wishful thinking where the things that we hope in is limited in terms of power. He says that the things that we're hoping in, if it's him, his power is immeasurable, cannot be measured. He has great power. He can make it all happen. But not only does he have the power, he even has the evidence to back up that power. That's what he said next. He says, according to the fact that I conquered death. Check this out. I have evidence. I am stronger than life. I'm stronger than death. I am life itself. I can turn every piece of hell that leads to death in your life into heaven that will be abundant life. And here's the evidence. Look at me. I've conquered death. But not only does he have the evidence, he also has the authority to exercise it because God has seated him in the heavenly realms, heavenly places, above all authority. He's not one of the sales appies. He is the main guy sitting at the head of the table, and he can make the big shot calls. That's the statement that he makes. And then that's all great. Paul lands it with, okay, so Jesus wants to give it. He can give it. He has the evidence to give it. Plus, he has the authority to delegate it. And you know what's the good news? He is giving all of that to you. And that means you and me, we can become carriers of hope. That's the picture. Now, with all of that being said, you're probably sitting there asking the question, great, Lorraine, how do I practically make that then a part of my own life? How do I access this immeasurable power, this great hope that will change my life into a place where there's heaven? I can guess you're asking that question. How does this practically happen? And I'm so happy that you asked that question because today's sermon is exactly all about that. It's about how do we access and see this immeasurable power of Jesus coming down into our own lives and giving us concrete hopes to see heaven coming. And what I would like to do to explore that is I'd like to quickly look at 2 Corinthians 3 verse 18. You can follow me on the screen. We're just going to look at that one little verse and we're going to unpack the process, the power of transformation and the power for transformation. It says the following, Paul writes, and he says, and we all with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. And in that little verse, Paul tells us about the process of Jesus' hopeful power that transforms us, that brings us to become that person that we always have been longing to become since we were small. That kind of picture, that significant, that valuable person. He's telling us about the process of how that happens. He also tells us about the power of transformation. And then he gives us the power for that glorious transformation that we can get in Jesus. Okay? So let's dive in and unpack each one of them a little bit this morning. The first one is the process of transformation. And we find that in this little word called beholding. Okay? It's a very old English word. Anybody use that word anymore? Who said, "Ooh, my love, I behold your beauty this morning. Liefie, jy so mooi, ek behold you." Anybody say that nowadays? Heard that from your boyfriend, anything like that? So it's not a common word that we use every day, no? And I think it's important then for me to just quickly unpack this word, that we realize, what does it mean when we behold? Why didn't Paul just say, "And with unveiled face, we look to and we gaze upon"? Why does he say behold? What does behold mean? Or we look at. He didn't even use that word. He uses this word, it's translated beholding. And I think it's a beautiful word. If you think about the word, you can break it up into just two basic words. The first one is be. And the word be in English means just be. Synonym for I am. It's being, your being. I be, my being. So I am. That's another way of saying be. And then the other side of this word is hold. So I am and then hold. Synonyms for holding is grip, take a hold of, keep captive, have a strong hold on something. So when you behold, it means that your whole being is gripped by the thing that you are gazing upon. I'm not just talking about your eyesight. I'm talking about your everything. Your everything is gripped by this new reality. You can't stop looking at it. You can't stop thinking about it. You can't stop meditating on it. It has a hold on your heart and a hold on your mind. You are taken captive by it. So for all the ladies, that hunky guy, get what I'm saying? For all the guys, that lovely lady. Okay? Or maybe you're like me, that flunked computer studies in grade 12. Anybody with me there? So I'm going to be vulnerable now. Okay, there we go. So grade 12 record exam, I had the unfortunate privilege of not making computer studies. And what I didn't know is that my computer study exam point would directly reflect on my report card. So I received my report card in matric right before I would write finals. And there was a beautiful red circle around computer studies. That was the first time ever in my life that really happened. So you can imagine that at that stage, I was a little bit filled with fear. So I was a paper boy at that stage of my life, and every morning I would get the opportunity to reflect on my life and what I've done and where I'm going with it, as I am from 5 to 6 in the morning delivering papers to everybody in my environment. And the space there in Magalieskrain, die noorde van die berg, lekker papa, there in Pretoria, where the hills look mostly like Sunningdale's hills. It's up and down like this. And I would be driving around on my bike and delivering papers. And I'll never forget that morning as I'm contemplating and thinking, because, by the way, that reality had a grip on me. It took me captive. That was the only thing that I was at that stage beholding. With my whole being, I'm thinking about, how will I give my parents my report card and get out alive of this situation? So as I am on my bike and I'm driving on that bike and life is going ahead and forward, the next moment I'm thinking to myself, you know what, I'm going down a busy street. It's called Bram Pretorius for all the guys that was there in that space. But I'm going down that street and I'm thinking to myself, you know what, life would be so amazing if I could just go to heaven right now. Look at that car coming. Maybe that's a good move. I just didn't have enough guts to go that direction, but that's how overwhelming the thought of that new reality was in my life. Do you guys get an idea of what it means to behold? So behold can be a positive thing. It can be the same moment as I saw Gerda and I just couldn't stop thinking about her. and she was the most beautiful thing in my life. And I would like steal roses and drop it at her window just to and risk losing paper people, because I stole it from their gardens, by the way, some of my clients. But anyways, because I was beholding her beauty, I would put up big, massive banners saying, sterkte met vandag se toets. But what it's actually saying is, I really, really love you. You're amazing. And I'm beholding you with every single fiber of my being. I'm just thinking about you the whole time, making plans. So there's a positive side to beholding, a beautiful reality that takes your heart capture and captivates you. But then there's also this anxious, fearful, dark, shame, guilt side that can also take captive your gaze. And you can behold both of them. So the process of beholding is allowing a reality to fully take your whole being captive. It consumes every part of you, your emotions, your thoughts, your willpower. Everything in you is focused on that thing that you meditate on. Okay? That's the process of being transformed. That's what Paul says. He says, if you want to see change in your life, this is how it works. You need to behold. Okay, you guys get what I'm saying? Okay, so that's the process. But now Paul says it's not just the process, it's also the power in that. And he brings the truth, he reveals the truth in our lives, and that's point number 2, regarding the power of transformation. When he says, what you behold, you will ultimately become. You will be transformed into the thing that you behold. Have you thought about this? Just for a moment. And just by the way, there's a lot of words for this. Transformed and so on and so forth. Some of the guys call it spiritual transformation, and I'm going to get spiritual now, and I'm going to behold, and I'm going to start my process of spiritual transformation. And usually in Christian circles, that means I'm going to start reading my Bible, and I'm going to start praying and so on and so forth. Now I'm going to start spiritually forming myself into a being. Okay? The problem with that idea is that from the moment you are born, you are busy with the spiritual transformation process. Because you are beholding things around you every single moment of your life. And what you behold, you become. So Hitler had a spiritual transformation process happening with him to the point that he became Hitler. And so on, Mother Teresa had a spiritual transformation process to the point that she became who she is. And we all are in that space. We're all in a process of transformation because we are beholding things the whole time and we are becoming what we are beholding. I don't know if you are with me on this. Let me quickly give you a few examples of what you can become should you behold a few things. So, for example, if you behold your fears, if that's a thing that grips your heart, what do you become? Anxious, overwhelmed by anxiety. If you behold your failures, you will become very insecure and uncertain. If you start beholding only your successes, you might lead to being blinded by arrogance. I'm not talking about celebrating and just acknowledging. I'm talking about beholding. That's your everything, your whole being. That's the picture that we are in. If you behold your future achievements and the hope that that will make you something, what do you become? Overwhelmed by pressure. Because you need to perform and get there. If you behold your pain, and trust me, I was there, and I'll maybe share my story quickly, you become bitter. Filled with great bitterness, if that's the thing that you behold your whole life long. I did that. And some of you guys that sit here have heard my story already, so if you have, sorry for that, but I think I need to tell it. So as a grade 7 boy, 13 years of age, I got sexually abused. And that formed a lot of pain in my life and stirred up something of a picture of viewing myself, a lens that I started viewing myself through. I looked towards people's approval to try and deal with that kind of pain, but it was never enough. And the longer I would view and go through this journey, it finally ended up when I was about 32 years old, where I couldn't even have friends because I was sexually abused by my best friend. So I couldn't trust friends. There's no way for me to trust someone else coming and building a good friendship with them because you want to hurt me. I cannot open up myself to you because I cannot be vulnerable in front of you because of the pain that defines me. That's the thing that I've been beholding for so long. To the point that I would almost quit ministry and want to take my own life when that pain was surfaced through a journey that Jesus walked with me. And we'll talk about that journey next week a little bit more. But just to tell you guys something of that journey in my life. So pain caused bitterness, so much so that I didn't even want friends around me. I didn't want anybody around me. I looked down at them and I was bitter. My wife, luckily, that she loves me and she's willing to speak the truth to me at a certain stage, she even looked at me, and you're going to probably laugh at this now, but she says, yes, Noreen, it looks like it's only you. Everybody hates you, you know. And she was helping me to get to grips with the reality of this monster that I'm beholding and that's taking captive everything in my life and forming bitterness in me. So if you behold your pain, I promise you, you'll end up there. If you behold your loss, something that you've lost, you'll probably be overwhelmed by poverty and see only how little you have and not how much abundance is around you. So whatever we behold, we become. It's not a question of whether you are busy with spiritual transformation or whether you are busy becoming someone. It's the question is, who are you becoming? That's the big question. Because every single day of your life, you're busy with this process. And then Paul steps into the last part of our little talk and his verse that he breaks open and like blows the scales when he says, here is the power to have a glorious transformation happening in your life. If you behold this, you will see heaven happening in your life. Okay? So if you choose to not behold fear, if you choose to behold this instead of fear, if you choose to behold this instead of success, if you choose to behold this instead of pain, you guys get the picture here. If you behold this thing, everything changes. What does he say? Beholding the glory of the Lord. Okay? That's the key. If you want to see heaven come down, the thing that you need to behold is the glory of God. And unfortunately, if I stop the sermon right here, everybody will walk out with a beautiful picture of what they think is the glory of God. And I'm thinking most likely it will be some other heaven picture, God sitting on his throne, religious view that we many times have of the glory of God. But can I maybe quickly take you on a journey that we just see what this word glory actually means and what is the glory of God that's being revealed, because we can see a specific aspect of the glory of God that Paul gives us a hint to, and I'm going to land with that little hint right at the end of the sermon. But firstly, let's just talk about what is the glory of God. What does the word glory mean? Well, for everybody in Doxa Deo, our name is actually glory. Doxa means glory. It's Greek for glory. And Deo is Latin for God. Doxa Deo, the glory of God. And Paul says, if you behold the doxa of Deo, how does that sound? How does it feel? It's quite cool, man. You can be transformed from glory to glory, an ever increasing glory. But you must behold the glory of God. So what does this word glory mean? In Greek, it's doxa, and in Hebrew, it's kabod. I hope I've spelled it correctly there, the English version of it. But the Hebrew, from the right to the left, would read out kabot. And the word kabot means weight or opinion. That's how it's used within Scripture. So when you would say this guy has glory, you would talk about the weight. So maybe a practical example. Anybody ever stood on Blaukransbrug, bungee jump before? Okay, so I have some hands there. Lekker. I'll come and speak to you guys. Just help me. My wife don't want me to go, but we'll organize something later, okay? But if you've ever been on one of those big bridges and you stand on it and the next moment a massive truck comes over that bridge, what do you feel happens to the bridge? shakes. Ever experienced that before? It's quite a crazy experience. That's what we would say. You would experience the weight, the glory of the lorry. And it's coming over that bridge, people, and it's shaking things up. And we see that word kavod being used like that. So it would be like the glory of God comes down and the mountains starts trembling. The weightiness of His glory is present. Okay, so that's the basic word, meaning of the word. But how we see that playing out in relationships happens with opinions. So let me just quickly put up a picture of a guy. Next up. There we go. You guys with me? Who's this guy? Mr. Driekus. Okay, so if you guys don't know, Shani is after. Driekus, yes. Okay, so imagine for a moment, because what if I told you I organized to have Driekus joining us in about 2 minutes from now. He'll be walking up those stairs. How do you feel? Imagine he walks in here. I mean, UFC world champion. And he walks in here. I can almost see smiles just thinking about it on your faces. Nah? Why? Because Driekus now has a certain amount of human glory connected to who he is. He has an achievement that few people can have in this world. So we have attributed, our opinions are pointing towards his glory. And the opinion about this guy is that he is next level. He's up there. He's a world champion. And jy gaan nie met Driekus mors nie, papa. You get what I'm saying? That's the opinion going around about Driekus du Plessis. So, and when you would walk in here, and even if there's like a big crowd of people, you know what will happen? Heads will start turning. You will start seeing eruption in the crowd. Babies will start crying. So you'll see eruptions happening in the crowd. Everybody will be looking. Heads will be turning. It's almost like the mountains shake. Because there's a guy with a mere sense of human glory walking into the building and he shakes things up. You guys see what's happening here? That's why they use the word glory. So, your glory is basically the sum total of the opinions of the people that lives around you and the way you carry that. You think about that for a moment? You would glory in, as a human being, in the opinions of other people and yourself. That's usually what human glory means. But now he says, I'm inviting you to not behold that. I want you to behold the glory of God. And the reason why I'm saying he's pointing us to a specific aspect of his glory is because he's talking about relational connection, unveiled faces. And I'm going to say something about that now. But in essence, what Paul is saying is if you want to be transformed from glory to glory, you need to behold the glorious opinion of God over you. That's what you need to see if you want to be transformed. You need to see the weighty, great, wonderful, loving opinion that He has of you and your life. And I know whenever I say that, many times we all stand before the situation where we believe we're not good enough for what God says, and especially when you hear what He really says. Not just hear the old Christianese phrase. When it really hits you, when it captures your heart, when it takes your gaze upon you, you start like, Papa. That's just what happens when this really happens to you. When it's not just an intellectual exercise, when it's opened up and your heart can for the first time truly see what God says about you. And how glorious is that opinion not? I mean, in the beginning of the word says that God crowned us with glory. We have a specific glory assigned to us as His creatures on this planet. And His opinion about you is amazing. It's a wonderful opinion. Now, I mentioned that we get the little key to that, and that brings me to the last part of this little talk, is that we get to view this glory with an unveiled face. Now, if you can read this portion of Scripture, you'll see that Paul is speaking about Moses going in the Old Testament into the tabernacle, into the Holy of Holies, into the glory presence, the hot spot of God's holiness, that he would be in that space. And when he comes out, the people said Moses' face was shining. It was filled with glory. It was reflecting the glory of God because he was spending time. People were like, ooh, wow. You guys get the picture there. But then what would happen with Moses is, as he continued staying away from that space, from being in God's presence, what would happen is the glory that's on his face would start diminishing, fade, slowly but surely. The face will not shine so much anymore. So what Moses did was he would veil his face from the people. That the people don't see that the glory that he has when he comes out from God fades. And then he feels a little bit inferior and not too strong and confident anymore. It's almost the same as when we many times do sin. We think we're amazing, we can be before God, and then we sin, and then we're like, oh my word, ek wil net just hide me. Put me somewhere that nobody can see me. I'm terrible, just like I'm the worst person in this world. Anybody been there before? It's almost like I want to save face. Just want to put something before my face. And now Paul says, it's not like that anymore. Jesus did something radically different. That you can now, with an unveiled face, meaning you never have to be ashamed of what you look like. There's never going to be a moment where you can be and have to be ashamed before the Father. Okay? Or be ashamed of who you are. Never going to be that moment that you can behold him with an unveiled face and see his glorious opinion of your life. That's the picture that he's talking about. And then he says, instead of Moses, we see the glory fading. He says, as you now behold him with an unveiled face, you will go from glory to ever-increasing glory, to more glory, to more glory. Your face is going to be shining more and more and more. It's going to be amazing. So the person that you're truly longing for becomes a reality when you are saturated by the opinion that God has over your life. That's the process. And that's the focus point that he's pointing to. And then he says, this not of our own doing, but the Lord, who is the Spirit. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on in week number 4. How does the Spirit of God do this in our lives? So there is a relational thing. But I would like to end with this. While we're talking about being unveiled, there's another specific space where we see the unveiling happening of a person. Maybe you've been at one of these spaces before. I've had the privilege of seeing this quite a few times in my life. It happens on wedding days. When that beautiful bride comes walking down, or future bride-to-be, and she is ready to connect herself and commit herself for the rest of her life to the one that she loves and that loves her in the deepest way possible. And then, what happens before she goes and stands before this moment of commitment? Dad comes and he lifts the veil, and there's now nothing standing in between her and her beloved. And guys, that's the picture. That's the picture that will fully transform you into the person that you long to become. It's if you allow the Holy Spirit to on not just a quiet time moment, because beholding is not a quiet time moment. When I'm beholding my failures, does it only go through a quiet time moment, or does it go my whole day long? Just want to ask you guys a little bit. So that's the invitation. Behold that moment and the words of the Father telling you that you are my beloved. You're not my disappointment. You're not my failure. You're not the one that I'm angry at. You're not my irritation. You are my beloved. And if someone like that says something like that over you, and you've experienced that in your life, it transforms you. And now, being married, maybe I should end off with this and then we can pray. I've discovered the secret to having a great life. And it is captured in this little phrase. Happy wife? No, thank you very much, ladies. Happy life. And do you know when my wife is at her happiest? When I look at her and I tell her, jy is die mooiste ding op hierdie aarde. Can you see? She's even smiling now. Do you see what's the effect of hearing that from someone that you deeply respect? Far beyond just your husband. We're talking about your Creator. You see how that stirs up a reality within you. That no matter who you are, no matter where you are, when He finds you and His first words to you is not you miserable mistake and failure, it's my beloved. And I love you no matter where you are, no matter where you come from. That's the thing that transforms you into the confident, humble, amazing person, significantly valued person that God created you to be.
Thanks for joining us online today. As a family, we would love to meet you in person, so plan a visit to our DD Durban campus by going to doxadeo.org/Durban.